Good morning, everybody. For those of you on in the U.S., and if anybody's joined from overseas, good afternoon. My name's Dan Sullivan. I happen to be the RVP for Condusiv Technologies in the East, and happy to have you joining us this morning to talk about how our patented I/O reduction software, V-locity and Diskeeper, help eliminate downtime and actually boost performance in your MEDITECH environments. And folks, we've spared no expense this morning, and joining me today will be Gary Kwan, otherwise known as GQ. GQ is our Senior Vice President of Technology Strategy, and GQ, we're happy to have you join us today.
Dan, glad to be here, and don't let those initials fool you. My lifestyle is a techie, jeans and a T-shirt here. And Dan, I do want to mention to the attendees that we like to make this very interactive. So you'll see a Q&A box over on the right side of the WebEx. And during the session, please enter in any questions that you may and address it to all participants here, all the presenters. And we'll either get to those questions then or at the end of the session. So really like to make it interactive. Thanks, Dan.
So thanks, GQ. And I'll just echo what GQ has said, folks. We've had some very great and good questions on previous webinars that we've participated in. So no question's a bad one. So please don't hesitate to add it in, as GQ said, in the Q&A box. In addition, for attending today's webinar, we'll be sending to you an NFR copy, not for resale copy, full server version of our latest release for V-locity. The release we're going to be talking about today that GQ and his team have worked tirelessly on to help improve our performance and MEDITECH's performance in their environment will be released next week. So the NFR will be on its way once that new release is offered to our field customers. So be on the lookout for that, but you will receive it after this 30-minute webinar. So again, thanks for joining. We appreciate it. Just one, brief bit about Condusiv and who we are. You may know us from a previous life, but we were known as the Diskeeper Corporation, and we were the preeminent defragmentation software product in the world. Sold over 100 million copies of Diskeeper. But in 2012, the world kind of turned itself upside down in the IT space because virtualization entered into the fray. And no longer did you defrag a SAN or an SSD. And so GQ and his technology team totally respun our software that we've been selling for decades to where it now does not, it can, but its main purpose is to prevent fragmentation from occurring in the Windows OS. So we are the only software company doing that today. And in addition, GQ and his team added a patented caching engine that caches small random reads that degrade performance. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But combined, those two features now, our customers see anywhere from a 30% plus reduction in I/O down to their back-end storage system, which improves performance exponentially. And it's very important in a MEDITECH environment. The caching engine that I mentioned is OEM by the folks you see there, HP, Dell, Lenovo, Western Digital. They brand it themselves and they put it in their laptops because it is so efficient and so smart that it's better than any caching engine that those folks themselves have developed, and you can appreciate the testing that they would have put us through before they branded it in their own. For what we do in Microsoft environments, we're a very close partner with Microsoft. GQ's been with Condusiv. How many years, GQ?
Too many, Dan. I think it's around 34 now.
34 years, folks, and the company's 37 years old. So you can see when GQ joined our organization. But he's worked very closely with Microsoft over those decades. We're the 12th oldest software company in the world. very close with Microsoft because of what we do with virtualization. We're a close partner with VMware, and we do some special things with SQL, et cetera. So that's it on who the company is, but, you know, we've got incredible street cred. Gartner called us a cool vendor, said we should be installed in every virtualized initiative. Well, you know, virtualization's been great for server efficiency, but really when it comes to I/O efficiency and I/O performance, it's been incredibly poor. Because what happens, Windows doesn't play well in a virtualized environment. And these two inefficiencies enter into the I/O stream whenever virtualization occurs, and quite frankly, even in a physical environment, the Windows I/O tax wants to break and does break up the large contiguous writes that you'd like to see coming out of the Windows OS into all of these small fragments that you see here in the top of the slide. And when those fragments hit the hypervisor, they get further randomized in what Gartner called, and we worked with Gartner to define this, the I/O blender effect. And as you can see there, it just further randomizes the I/O that's random coming out of the Windows OS in a virtualized environment here. And no matter what you have on the back end, all flash, hyperconverged, vSAN, spinning media, it has to deal with all of this random, unnecessary I/O. And quite frankly, in this virtualized environment, folks, if you went to write a gigabyte of data, it may take 100,000 I/Os. And with using our I/O reduction software, it may only take 50 or 60,000 I/Os. So these tiny random I/Os are, you know, chewing up performance, as you can see there, and just creates an incredible drag on efficiency in the environment. GQ, anything else to add?
I just want to note, Dan, you talk about the virtualized environment. The same thing happens on physical environments too. That Windows I/O attacks, that's on the Windows operating system. So it happens on virtual machines and physical machines. That I/O blender effect, although we looked at it at the hypervisor, that same thing can happen on shared storage too. For instance, you have several machines, physical machines, going to the same different LUNs on the same SAN, and that causes that same I/O blender effect. So it affects physical machines too, Dan.
Great. Well, thanks, GQ. And folks, you know, it's great to have GQ with us here today because he keeps the sales guy honest here in any kind of technical conversation. So we appreciate it, GQ, or I do for sure. So thank you.
Don't doubt yourself, Dan. He's pretty technical. Don't let him fool you.
So, folks, understanding this incredible I/O inefficiency that exists in a Windows environment, as GQ said, whether physical and virtual, the same then translates over into the MEDITECH space, which you're all running today. So, and here's what MEDITECH has to say. And you can read this faster than I can speak it, so I won't do that. But it basically talks that MEDITECH suffers from severe fragmentation. And because of that, you can realize sluggish EMR performance and or risk application failure or downturn when the file attribute list or the FAL, reaches its size limit. And then if you see there, as Mike Belkner says, the Associate VP of Technology, that defragmentation is required for versions 5 and 6 of MEDITECH. Well, understanding that defrag is required is a problem, as we talked about in virtualized environments. So therefore, we enter the scene as the preeminent and patented fragmentation prevention solution for a MEDITECH environment. And you can see on the bottom there what Mike has to say about our solution. But, you know, we are strongly recommended by MEDITECH to be installed in the environment to help to prevent fragmentation, to mitigate sluggish EMR performance, and to save any possibility of failure in the environment or downtime required. So with that, GQ, I'm going to turn it over to you, unless you have anything else to say here about Mike and what he had to say.
Yeah, let me just follow up on one thing, and this was the MEDITECH people will probably relate to this. What happened is that, this was several years ago. A MEDITECH customer was running, and all of a sudden this application stopped working. And it turned out to be a file system limitation. And what it was no more data could be written to a data file. And found out it was a file system limitation, which I'm going to get into on the next slide. But what happened is that MEDITECH contacted Microsoft. Microsoft then referred them to us. And the reason they referred them to us because of our experience in the file system and defragmentation. We actually wrote the defragmenter that comes in Windows for Microsoft. So they contact us to help solve this issue for them. So that was a nice recommendation.
It's
So
fantastic.
that's how we got involved with MEDITECH and solving this issue. And if you go to the next slide here, I'm going to get a little bit technical here for the audience here. Now, they mentioned this term FAL, and what it is, it's called the File Attribute List. And what it is that on the NTFS file system, there's a file record for every file that exists on your volume. Now that file record contains data like, what the name is, protection, but also it points to where the data for that file exists. And if that data gets fragmented, well, it has to contain many pointers to where those pieces of data exist. And of course, that's called fragmentation, as we know it. And as that fragmentation grows, and it grows very largely, they create this metadata structure called the FAL, or File Attribute List. And what that is it contains all the pointers to where all those fragments of data are for that file. Now, when it has to create this FAL, that means there's extreme fragmentation. And I'm not just talking hundreds or thousands. Usually when it creates a FAL, we're talking millions of fragments. And what happens is Microsoft, in their great wisdom, never thought the fragmentation will get so bad because they set a size limit for this file attribute list, which, as indicated in that note before, 256 KB. And when it reaches that limit, guess what? If it's a data file, you can't write any more data to it. If it's a folder file, you can't put any more data into it. So what that means is any applications using that file stops. And of course, as an EHR system, it stops. And that causes great consequences there. So that was the limit there that is causing the big problem here. Now, this file attribute list, when it fills up, as I indicate, that's millions of fragments. So not only does it, as it's growing there, and once it reaches limit, it stops application. Well, think about it. Millions of fragments, that's going to cause performance issues too, because every time it has to go access that file, it has to issue millions of IOs to hit that, to read that file. Now, Dan, I'm just going to touch upon this next slide just a little bit here. This is, you'll get a copy of this presentation, but this is just, a presentation of this file attributes and the MFT, the file record, and just saying how it grows with more fragments. This file just keeps on growing to contain all this data here. And as I indicated, there's a size limit, and when it reaches that, No more data can be added to it, and no more, if it's a folder, no more files added to it. So that's the problem here. Now, Dan, if you go to, now we're going to go to the solution here, and why we're very unique here. Because you would think, okay, I'll just run the defragmenter and defragment this file, any defragmenter. And that will help a little bit, but we found some restrictions on there. And that is that API within the file systems, when you go defragment the file, it actually makes it grow. And also when you defragment it, it decrease the number of fragments in it, but it does not decrease the size. So, for instance, let's say that file is 128 KB in size, and there's 1 million fragments in it. You can defragment it and decrease the number of fragments, but the size still says 128. So it helps stems the growth. But using any other defragmenter, if you defragment it, it actually makes the file grow. I know it's a little catch-22 situation. So what is unique, and we're the only one to do it, we found out how to defragment that file without making it grow. And we're the only defragmenter to do this. So, don't run the built-in defragmenter to handle the file issue, because it's going to make it grow here. So that's what makes us unique. Now, I know there's a few more people that joined us here, and I just want to tell them what we told the earlier attendees was there's a little Q&A box over on the right-hand side. So if you have any questions, because I'm going over a lot of data here, please put in the Q&A, address it to all presenters, and we'll answer it then or at the end of the session. So we're the only one that has this file-safe file movement. The other thing that we also included in this next version coming up, we looked at a lot of the MEDITECH volumes and found out that the free space is very fragmented on many of these volumes, and that leads to this file growing. So we just created a new free space consolidation engine to handle these extreme free space fragmented volumes. And it's as I said, it's also file safe too, because if you don't do it correctly, you can grow the file while you're consolidating the free space. Okay, Dan? Dan, could you go to the next one? Now, here's something also unique with us. As I said, the file cannot be shrunk online by defragmenting, but by defragmenting correctly, we can stem the growth so it doesn't grow any further. But, we've had some companies, medtech companies, and also, just to tell you, although we're talking about MEDITECH, our audience here, we've seen this issue of the file growing on some other cases too, on Exchange and some other databases that have reached the same limitation here. So it's not only MEDITECH, but we do see it more on the MEDITECH system just because of the type of processing that's going on here. But we've had some customers that, the file is very high and needs to shrink it. Well, the way to do it right before was you have to do a logical copy of that file off to another volume, remove it off that volume, and this all means that the system is taken offline, so your downtime during this procedure. And then you have to reboot the system to clear out the free space cache, then copy that file back onto that volume to get rid of that file fragmentation. Now, if those files, which we have found, are very large, and some of them are, half a terabyte, and some we've seen a terabyte in size, this could take hours to do. And we know that MEDITECH hospitals do not want to be down that long. So what we created was a offline FAL remediation tool, which can shrink that. You still have to take the system down, but rather than hours, we've gotten down to doing it in minutes. And usually it's 3 to 5 minutes to actually do the procedure, and we can shrink it down. So this is a nice tool to have. We've also seen even users running our utility. We had one customer, MEDITECH customer, they let the volume get down to 2% free space on one of their volumes. And when you get down that low, the fragmentation just grows, and that causes the FAL to grow quickly. So we had to perform FAL remediation there too. Another nice feature with our product is that it does not require a reboot to install or update here. So one of the reasons we did this was we understood that MEDITECH does not like to take their systems down. So this does not require. It's very easy to install. It's a 3 to 4 minute procedure just to install it. Now, these features are included both in our Condusiv V-locity and Diskeeper products. V-locity for the virtual servers and Diskeeper for the physical servers. And we're the only defragmenter to have these features, both to handle the FAL issue. Dan, that's the main features within our product to handle the FAL remediation. But Dan, I do want to just mention to these sites that our product also contains 2 other features. And if you go to the next slide, I want to show you what these other features do. Now, before Dan showed you how the file system breaks down all the IOs into small IOs, which causes a fragmentation issue. And what you really want is this healthy IOs, large sequential read IOs. Not only, from the fragmentation point of view, but also from the performance point of view. This reduces the number of I/O to get that same data to and from the storage back to the systems. And this is what we want to achieve here. Now, Dan, do you have something to add here?
No, thanks, GQ, and appreciate it. And folks, I hope you can appreciate, too, what GQ and his team have put together here to help you all in your MEDITECH environments. No small task, and now even more improvements coming out in a week or so. And on top of that, and as GQ mentioned, and I was even at a hospital yesterday talking about the no reboot feature. Usually your reboot windows are monthly, some are quarterly, and now you can just install on the fly, and you're up and optimizing right away. So as GQ mentioned here, and if you think about that other slide I showed with all of the small random fragments happening, in this slide, this is where instead of 100,000 IOs to write a gigabyte of data, we're probably looking at 50 or 60. So think of it another way, folks. For those of you that have to travel or work on any kind of busy interstate or whatever, we take half the cars off the highway at rush hour. We pack the remaining cars full of people, and we put them in an HOV lane that works. Simple as that. So it's quite something what GQ and his team have accomplished. And where do we sit? So GQ mentioned that we sit in the Windows OS. So we're those 2 light filter drivers sitting in the Windows OS. So if it's compatible with Windows, and obviously MEDITECH is, but MEDITECH hospitals install us across their entire environment, non-MEDITECH also. So if it's compatible with Windows, it's compatible with us, and we optimize that inefficient Windows I/O 24/7, 365. And it doesn't matter what kind of storage environment you have. As I mentioned earlier, we have customers on all flash, Extreme IO, Pure Storage, Nutanix, SimpliVity, Nimble, etc. They're all seeing significant benefits in the performance of their environments. While the flash is faster, no question about it, it still has to deal with all of that small, random, unnecessary I/O that we eliminate. So pretty obvious where we sit. And by the way, folks, you won't hardly even see us in Task Manager from a CPU utilization standpoint. We have some additional patented technology that GQ and his team have put together to use idle CPU time to do the work that we do. We are set it and forget it software. We beat the Ronco chicken guy, folks, to that moniker. GQ and his team trademarked that years ago because once you install us, there is nothing for you to do. We are totally automated. Nothing for you to do except go and look at some dashboards to see how many IOs we're eliminating and the benefits you're getting. So GQ, I mentioned those two patented filter drivers. You want to talk about them briefly?
I will, Dan. And, just to this group, we talked about the main point for MEDITECH, and that's a FAL remediation technology. And we call that MediRite. But with our products, you also get these two other technologies. And one is what we call the right IO reduction, called IntelliRite. And that is, as we indicated before, the Windows systems tends to break apart the I/O, and we put in some logic in there to give some intelligence back to the file system. So instead of writing a whole bunch of small random IOs.
Hey GQ, this is Dawn. I'm sure that the audience really wants to hear what you're saying, and your sound went out.
Can you hear me, Don?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, sorry, Don. And so the file system tends to break things up into small random IOs, and we feed intelligence back to the file system so it will write it up in a nice sequential IO. And, and if you ever look at storage, they give you two benchmarks, one for random IO and one for sequential IO. And the sequential IO always outperform the random IO. So if we can enforce a file system to write nice sequential IO out there, you're going to get the best performance out of your storage. We're also going to eliminate a lot of IOs having to go down that system. And then the analogy I like to put down is, if you have to bring a gallon of water from one place to another, do you do it in 100 Dixie cups, or do you do it in one big gallon bucket and get it done at one time? And that's what we help the file system do there. So that's the first technology. The second one is our read caching technology. And as Dan indicated, we're a little unique in how we do our caching. First of all, you don't have to allocate memory to for our cache. We're only going to use what's available, not being used out there. And of course, if there isn't any available memory out there, then we won't use it. But system and user processes always have the priority over the memory. And if they need it and we have some, we automatically give it up. So there's never a memory congestion issue. The second uniqueness is how we determine what to put in cache and keep in cache for the best performance. Many caching products just say, this data was just read. Let me put it in the cache and hope that gets read again. We're a little bit different in that we're mining the system, seeing what data is getting read the most, and that's one factor. Another factor is what data is going to give the best performance gains. And what we found out is all those little noisy little IOs, read IOs, that are causing performance issues. And if we can cache those, we'll give you back your performance. And what this does is, by caching it on the virtual machines itself or physical machines, we satisfy that I/O right there. So that means it doesn't have to go down to the network. It doesn't have to go to the storage to get satisfied. It gets satisfied right there very quickly. And with even if you have SSD storage, the DRAM is 10 to 15 times faster than the SSDs. So we're satisfying those very quickly. And we've gotten very good performance gains, as Dan will indicate in the next slide. So besides the FAL remediation technology to handle that Windows limitation that we're running into here, you also get these other two technologies in the product. So back to you, Dan.
All right, great, GQ. And again, folks, remember, any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and be happy to, to answer whatever questions you may have. So thanks, GQ, for that overview, too, on both IntelliMemory and IntelliWrite. Just going to give you a couple quick examples, folks, and we'll be, moving on. So we're in hundreds of hospitals today because of what we do, both for MEDITECH and for non-MEDITECH environments. Just want to give you two examples here. That's it. One is Hancock Regional. So look at this. They were loading 2 patient records in 7 seconds. It was a problem for them. All they did was install our software, let our software do what we talked about it does automatically, and they went from 2 patient records in 7 seconds to 6 patient records in 4 seconds, more than 3x faster, just by installing our I/O reduction software. CHRISTUS Health. CHRISTUS is one of the largest healthcare institutions in the good old state of Texas. GQ has worked for them for years, and he actually has a weekly call with the IT team there because of how important we are to their environment. But at one point, a few years ago, they were looking they had virtualized, they ran into performance issues, and they were going to upgrade their storage environment. They had been a Diskeeper customer, though, and they had heard about V-locity, so they said, well, we might as well give this a try before we go and spend $2 million to upgrade our NetApp environment. They put V-locity in and eliminated the performance issues, and were able to defer that $2 million PO for a couple of years just by installing our software. We doubled the performance of their MEDITECH environment. And look at that, a billing batch job. They dropped from 20 hours to 12. Just dramatic numbers. And if I was telling you this and not showing you these actual customer examples, and we have hundreds of them, I think you might have a hard time believing what I'm saying about what our software can do. Everybody's different, which is why we asked you just to give it a try. Here's finally from CHRISTUS. GQ had mentioned, too, that we had just recently added a no reboot feature. CHRISTUS has about 500 MEDITECH servers, give or take 100 or so. But because of what they saw in the MEDITECH environment, they put us out across their entire Windows environment. We are running in over 2,500 servers in their environment and optimizing I/O, increasing performance, reducing headroom in their environment. And in addition, here's what they said about now the no reboot version that GQ and his team have released to the field back in last April. Truly set it and forget it, fully automated, nothing for anybody to do. So we're looking forward to having you try our software. So what are really the next steps? As I mentioned, in a week or so, you'll be getting an email from us with a not-for-resale copy of a full server version. It's a $525 MSRP license that's yours to use. So certainly install it. There's a dashboard that shows you exactly what the software is doing for you around I/O elimination, memory utilization, et cetera. But in addition to that, besides single server licenses, we also offer a host-based license, and that is we cover all of the VMs that may be sitting on an ESXi or Hyper-V host. We install again in the OS in VMs, not on the hypervisor. But we're happy to let you try a host-based license because each Windows VM generates a lot of inefficient I/O, as you saw before. So you can optimize one, but if you have 5, 10, 15 or more VMs on that host, you get what they call the noisy neighbor effect, and all those other VMs that aren't being optimized can actually almost wash out the benefit you're getting from that one. So we're happy to let you try our host-based license too. So I hope that's, what we shared with you today has been enlightening, that you're excited to go ahead and try us and deploy us. GQ, do we happen to have any questions out there?
We do, Dan. I see the first one says, how many MEDITECH hospitals are you installed at? And Dan, this may be more of a sales question, but I believe we're over 100 MEDITECH hospitals that we're currently installed at. Maybe 114. I can't remember.
GQ, you can join the sales team anytime you'd like. So well done. Well done on that. But remember, and those aren't necessarily single hospitals, right? Those are healthcare environments. And as many of you know today, healthcare institutions are, consolidating. So multiple hospitals being part of that one. And you saw where we are at with CHRISTUS too. And we have multiple hospitals where we are on 500, 1,000 or more, and some that we're on, 50 or 60 VMs.
And then, Dan, I see another question. So, is it just set and forget it and just install it on here? And I would recommend, when you're going to install it on your MEDITECH systems, to, contact one of our sales engineers here, and they can make some recommendations, because there are some recommendations, better settings for EMR and MAT servers that we found that will be better for those. So contact the SE and they'll help you with that.
And GQ, if I may just interject here for a second too, it's not just file servers either that MEDITECH talks about having a defragmentation plan for. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, Dan. It's not just the file servers. It's basically most of the MEDITECH servers that they require us to be on.
Yep, thanks.
Yep. And then I do have another question. Why can't I just run the regular defragmenter? And you might have missed this before, but any other defragmenter, because of a restriction within, or limitation within the Windows API that is used to move data or defragment data, it can make the file size grow while you defragment it. We're the only one that figured out how to do a defragmentation without making that file size structure grow. So that's why we're very unique, and we're the only one that can do that. And then someone asked you, Dan, you mentioned a new version coming out. And, as we've worked with MEDITECH, we've learned things, and we're going to be announcing a updated version within 2 weeks or so, that we made some enhancements. For instance, we found on some MEDITECH systems we have to be more aggressive when the file size has reached a certain size, and so we put in the intelligence to become more aggressive when needed and less aggressive when needed to handle the file issues. And also, we are introducing a new free space consolidation engine. As I indicated, on a lot of the MEDITECH volumes, we've seen extremely fragmented free space. And in order to handle those extreme cases, we introduce a new free space engine to handle that. But yes, you can get updated that when that gets released at no cost. Now, Tony here says, we're hosted through NTT Data. How does this get incorporated? Now, we do work with NTT Data, and they should have, on many of their hospitals I service, they do have us incorporated on there. Now, one thing I want to mention on there is that found out that several of the people through NTD Data are running very old versions of our product and want to get up. You do want to check that and make sure it gets updated to the latest version. So I would just contact your account manager at NTD Data and just make sure they are running the latest version that you're getting hosted on, Tony.
And GQ, in addition to NTT Data using us, and using us for the reasons, folks, that you heard today, but also CloudWave and Technicore in their hosted environments use our solution. And Tony, I also want to mention that while if it's just your MEDITECH environment being hosted by NTT Data, which is great, what we talked about is very applicable to all of your non-MEDITECH servers in your environment. SQL, SharePoint, Windows-based applications all benefit in some cases quite dramatically from our I/O reduction software and the caching of reads in our software. So you really want to take a look at us in your non-Windows environment. We're happy to work with you on that, Tony.
And also, Dan, I don't know if you mentioned it, like CloudWave, we're the defragmenter that they put on all their systems there.
You're right, them and Technicore, GQ.
And
we're all
yes.
Yep. So they understand the problem and they understand what the solution is, and folks, it is us.
Yeah. And Tony had another question here. He says, eventually we're going to house MEDITECH on-prem. Will this be an easy transition? And yes, it will be, Tony. And, our team will just help you make sure that everything gets installed and set up correctly on your systems on-prem. No problem on that. I will tell you that, besides the product itself, we like to praise ourselves on the service that we provide. I indicated that we do this offline FAL remediation. Well, we know that MEDITECH hospitals, you can't take your systems down during the day. It's usually during the middle of the night, and we have been there many times, middle of the night, working with MEDITECH during the hospitals during those times to get this FAL remediation completed. So no problem. Dan, let's see. How is this? Here's one more question, Dan. How is this product licensed? And I'll pass that on to you.
All right, GQ, I got that football. Thanks. So, folks, as I mentioned, you're going to be getting a full NFR single server license, but by attending this webinar today. So it's licensed either per VM, per physical server, or as on a host-based model, where for one incredibly low cost, you will cover all of the VMs on a single host, 5, 10, 15, 20 or more. And so it's very advantageous on a host-based environment. And again, you want to put us on all of the VMs on a host because, as I mentioned earlier, while you may optimize one VM, all of the others on that host are creating all of the noisy I/O that reduce performance and increase inefficiency. So all the noisy neighbors, if you will. So that's why the host-based model is a very effective way to go. Anything else, GQ?
That's it, Dan. I think that's it on the questions. And I just want to appreciate the audience here for attending this. And a lot of people didn't know. Some of the people didn't know about this requirement from MEDITECH on having, a defragmenter on the systems, and why we're the recommended ones. Anyway, so I'm glad to get this word out to them. And if they have any other questions afterwards, feel free. You'll get a contact to a sales rep, and you can send those questions down to them, and we'll get those answered for you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, GQ. I appreciate it. GQ, I couldn't have said all the technical things any better. So, well done there. Thank you so much, GQ. Thanks, everybody, for attending today. And again, we look forward to working with you, both in your MEDITECH and in your non-MEDITECH environments to improve performance, increase efficiency without a lot of expense and having to add additional hardware. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.